how would you be able to determine a legitimate skeptical inquiry or a skeptic's inquiry from a legitimate doubt? Assuming that we both ascribe to the given theory, I accept that. We're all within the general theory that we accept, which is science. We now have someone who presents to us something that goes completely counter to everything that we seem to know within our theory seems to be the case.
Yes. Well, now, good. Now, this should be a situation where, well, you're wondering how I would decide whether this man's really in doubt, or whether it's a skeptical doubt for the sake of...
There's a fine line, it seems to me. When I talked earlier in our interview, there's a fine line sometimes between what constitutes fanaticism and what constitutes skepticism. And it largely depends upon what and how people look at the particular doubt that's being presented. Now, I just want to know, how do we determine whether this is indeed we're confronted with a fanatical skeptic, or whether we're confronted with someone who seriously is in doubt about this issue?
Well, it would be a psychological judgment, and there would be manifestations that we would think were indicative of one rather than the other. We would think, or we might think in terms of the sorts of considerations that might plausibly be leading him to doubt this thing, and if we find it altogether too hard to imagine what those might be, we'll suspect him of a feigned doubt in the way of skepticism.
So you'd ultimately have to face the tribunal, as it were.
We would, yes. Yeah. Yes, a fair chunk of it, perhaps.
Right, okay.
Professor Quine, I had one more question about responses to skepticism about the external world. It concerns the use of the principles which would govern radical translation or radical interpretation, the use of those principles to try to give a global response to radical skepticism. Perhaps the idea I have in mind is associated more with Donald Davidson than with yourself, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. What do you think of the idea that the principle of charity, which says, roughly speaking, so interpret the other to make him or her come out true by and large, what do you think of the idea that the principle of charity gives us a response to skepticism? After all, if the only way to interpret people is so that they come out true by and large, they're not going to be wrong about most things.
Yes, that's certainly Don Davidson's answer to skepticism, as I get it. Well, I don't subscribe precisely to the principle of charity. What I think should guide us is the principle of psychological plausibility. If we have observed in this alien society some outlandish ceremonies and rites and taboos, it may be more plausible to construe his sentence in such a way that it comes out false, but chimes in with his other apparent strange ideas, and so that we could be misled by applying the principle of charity. But on the other hand, this coincides, this psychological approach coincides over a wide area with the principle of charity, in that people are so much alike. And even these exotic natives, when it comes to ordinary practical things, or the way, I guess it's the Azande, that, according to Evans Pritchard, that put so much store in magic, but they only apply, they make ordinary causal, we're told by him, ordinary causal statements and causal explanations, very much the way we do, common sense. And magic comes in only in cases that we would say are practically unpredictable. It's luck, it's coincidence. We don't have an explanation. They bring in magic to explain it. even these people, on the whole, we would come out pretty well by taking each of their sentences to be something that's true by our lights.
Right. But still, the principle interprets so as to maximize intelligibility, what some people call the principle of humanity. That principle, rather than the principle interprets so as to maximize truth, looks like a more plausible principle, but the price you pay is that it robs you of a way of responding to skepticism.
Yes, yes.
Which you didn't particularly want anyway.
That's right, yes.
Right. What a happy circumstance.
Confronted with a pair of alternative theories, you said that the way to decide which one of them, if any, to accept is to compare their predictions with the observable facts. But suppose we're faced with a couple of competing theories that make the same observable predictions and that are equally simple. Here we would have a case of what you've called underdetermination of theory by data. What do you think is the right policy in this situation? Which of the theories ought we to believe, if any?
Well, there are three, perhaps, that I should, three possibilities I should begin with. One, that the theories are simply intertranslatable. That's not interesting. Intertranslatable and both coming out as saying, one going completely into the other and vice versa, so that it's just really the same theory in that, in an intuitive sense of the word. But second, there's a case where the two theories are incompatible, and yet they're empirically equivalent. And that can happen because the incompatibility can be in the theoretical sentences. There's a way of eliminating that alternative I got a hint of this from Davidson years ago, namely, if there's logical conflict between the two theories, it means that there will be a sentence, there will be many, but in particular there will be a sentence of which the one theory affirms and the other denies. That surely then is a highly theoretical sentence because it can't be closely connected with test cases since the theories are empirically equivalent. So it will contain some theoretical term or two, highly theoretical. We can resolve the conflict by treating that term as two different terms, maybe change the spelling of one of them in the two theories, because after all it's a theoretical term that hasn't been pinned down by empirical criteria. We're free to do this. If we do that right across the board, every time there's another inconsistency, we do the same trick. We end up by reconciling the theories. So this reduces all three cases now to one. And this is a case where you have two theories that are empirically equivalent and are not intertranslatable, not sentence by sentence. You might say, well, the whole theory is a translation of the whole theory. But they are compatible. Yes, not intertranslatable. If there are theories that have been rendered compatible by Davidson's device, this means that they're not entirely in the same language. There are some theoretical terms of the one that aren't translatable into the other and vice versa. And so here's the real case then that I think presents the problem. What do we do about it? If the theories were if the theories were in the same language and were consistent, I would say just throw them together, because I wouldn't think of this as a loss of economy. I think of this rather as an enrichment because the sentences are the same, and insofar as the theoretical sentences of the one theory differ from as the ones that are accepted in the one theory are not accepted in the other. But still, the whole things are empirically equivalent. Take those in. enrichment in that now some more of our theoretical sentences, which were hanging fire, we hadn't decided whether they're true or false, we can now say they're true.